All right, Alyssa, whenever you are ready.
All right, we are live.
Excellent, thank you. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for tuning in to tonight's Planning Commission meeting. I'm Marty Dahl, Community Development Director for the City of Victoria. Due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, the City of Victoria is conducting this evening's meeting virtually. However, even in a virtual setting, we do want to make sure that our public meetings continue in an open and transparent manner. During meetings such as this evening's that do not have a public hearing, comments can be sent to the Planning Commission at any time in advance, electronically via email or using our online form on our website. That form can be found at victoria.civicweb.net/portal. You can also email mdoll, D-O-L-L, at ci.victoria.mn.us with comments to be shared with the Commission. During future meetings that would include a public hearing, we will provide the ability for those wishing to speak to do so via conference call. A quorum of the Planning Commission members are participating in this meeting remotely, and all actions of the Commission will be taken by a roll call vote. And finally, we are streaming this meeting live on the City of Victoria's YouTube channel and are also recording so it can be viewed later on demand. And just one final update before I turn it over to you, Chair. Just want to let the Commission know that at last evening's City Council meeting, the Council did appoint alternate number 1, Christian Pedersen, to a regular member. So he will be fulfilling the remainder of former Commissioner Blazer's term through 2022. And Katie Kohler was also moved up, who it looks like Katie has joined us now from alternate 2 to alternate number 1. The plan, assuming none of the rest of you are going anywhere, is that we're going to wait to fill alternate 2 until the application and appointment process next spring. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Chair.
Okay, great. Well, first, congratulations, Commissioner Pedersen. Welcome to the group. And Commissioner Kohler, glad to have you as our first alternate. So welcome. On behalf of all of us, welcome.
Thank you.
I'll now call this, you're welcome. I will now call this meeting to order. Our first order of business is to adopt the agenda for tonight's meeting. Members of the Planning Commission, as a reminder, please state your name when moving and seconding. And please remember to mute your microphones when you are not speaking to avoid any background noise. Commissioners, is there a motion to adopt the final agenda?
This is Commissioner Iverson. I move that we adopt the final agenda as submitted.
Thank you, Commissioner Iverson. Is there a second?
Pedersen, second.
Thank you, Commissioner Pedersen. I have a motion made by Commissioner Iverson, seconded by Commissioner Pedersen. I'm now going to take a roll call vote. Start with Commissioner Kuhn.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Gar. I think you're muted, but I saw you say aye. I think you're still muted. I hear you.
Oh, that's good. Okay. Well done.
So, Commissioner Gar,
Yes?
is that approved? Yes?
Aye. Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. Commissioner Iverson.
Aye.
Commissioner Moore.
Aye.
Commissioner Schwarting.
Aye.
Commissioner Pedersen.
Aye.
I also approve. Thank you. The motion carries. Our next order of business is to adopt the minutes from our November 17th, 2020 Planning Commission meeting. Commissioners, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
We just did that.
Commissioner Iverson, I move that we approve the Planning Commission meetings as submitted from the November 17th, 2020 meeting.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Commissioner Moore, I second that we motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you. I have a motion made by Commissioner Iverson, seconded by Commissioner Moore. I will now take a roll call vote. We'll go through the same order. Commissioner Kuhn?
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Gar?
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Iverson?
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Moore?
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Schwarting?
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Pedersen?
Aye.
Thank you. I also aye. Motion carries. We will now be moving on to our discussion items. Commissioner, just a reminder, please mute your microphones when you are not speaking to avoid any background noise. Thank you. Our only item for discussion tonight is item 3.1, downtown parking ordinance discussion. For those watching or listening at home tonight, please note there is no action being taken on this item tonight. This is for discussion. I will now turn it over to Community and Economic Developer Director, Marty Dahl, for the staff presentation. Marty, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, Commissioners. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Ken, thank you.
All right.
Yes.
Excellent.
Yes.
All right, yeah. As the chair indicated, we are having a discussion tonight on our downtown parking ordinance. So as you'll recall, we did have a very brief agenda item on this earlier this year where it was more so an update to the commission that staff was contracting again with HKGI, who had conducted our downtown parking study in 2018, finalized in 2019. And that we would be undertaking a little bit of additional analysis as part of a phase 2 to that study and looking at a potential moving towards our ordinance more towards a shared parking type model. So we do have some information from our consultants that we want to share with the group this evening, and then of course open it up to any questions and discussion and direction as to how we'd like to move forward with this item. So just as some background, in 2018, HKGI did conduct a downtown Victoria parking study. That study was finalized and adopted in February of 2019. That study really had the following primary objectives: to collect and assess utilization counts for downtown Victoria, to better understand existing parking needs and issues. So this was really a periodic count of different dates, different times of year, different times of day, how many vehicles are actually parked in the different places in downtown, and that data was included in that study. They were also tasked with developing a parking tool that would allow us to more easily assess downtown Victoria's redevelopment assumptions. So based on a new use or a change of use that would come into downtown and their impacts to the parking supply, as well as how many parking spaces would be required for that type of use. And then finally, it was also asked to establish strategies and recommendations that support a district-wide parking approach that would also foster economic development initiatives. So as part of that study, which was linked in your background packet, there were also several recommendations. As we noted in our previous discussion on this, some of those recommendations were implemented, some were tried and determined just not to really be all that feasible. And then there are other recommendations that the city has yet to undertake. One of those being looking at updating our parking ordinance and requirements, which is the process we're beginning now. So just a little bit of additional information on that study. So those utilization counts indicated that there is additional capacity for district-wide parking, specifically during morning and afternoon hours. So you can kind of see a look at, well, this is one of the tables I pulled from that report below, which was showing the available parking supply averaged out during different periods of time through the month of October. This table does include private parking spaces, which are a little bit different beasts. We're really going to be talking about public parking this evening. But you can see that this data extrapolates to the public parking as well, just not quite as high of numbers. That there is ample parking in the morning and early afternoon hours, and we do get more limited in the evening. However, that study also did indicate that we are not over capacity in our district-wide parking model in those evening hours. However, there is a parking convenience issue that the core of downtown and near most of the restaurants and shops and the places that folks like to visit in the evening are usually full. And we are getting close to capacity in those public parking counts. So that's just a little bit of the data that we used from the study to kind of continue our second phase. Also, as just a little bit of background, the current downtown parking requirements, there is a code section that was linked in your background, section 20-7, that outlines what the requirements are for parking in downtown and how many parking spaces are needed. One thing to note is that that ordinance does allow up to a 50% reduction in the parking minimum requirements as are outlined in code. What we've seen in practice is that up to 50% typically means 50%. If a use is coming in, they will run the calculations based on the code, divide that by 2, and that's typically what ends up being their parking requirements. Another thing to note is that the parking minimums that are included in code today are applicable to all zoning districts. So it doesn't matter if it is in the central business district or in another area of the city. Based on that land use, those minimum parking requirements are all the same, which I believe was the intention of allowing some reduction when you're in a more urban downtown setting. There are some challenges with our current ordinance, one of them being that it does get difficult to determine and calculate how shared parking can and should be incorporated when determining minimum parking requirements for development or expansions or change of use. We obviously know that we have parking downtown, public parking downtown that has some capacity, but trying to figure out how that shared parking is allocated. We certainly don't want to overpark our downtown. It is not a very large square footage area and don't want it to be dominated with parking lots. So there is that balance there in trying to calculate how much shared parking should be incorporated in those minimums. And then there are also some concerns, as I'm sure this commission has heard, the city has heard, over just the total parking capacity in downtown and any impacts of new development. As I mentioned earlier, the study that was conducted a couple of years ago did show capacity, but it did show in the evening hours that a lot of the prime parking is full in the downtown area. So where are we at today? So as I mentioned, we did contract again with HKGI to kind of take their initial analysis to this second phase, at least for the specific piece related to the parking ordinance itself. So what we asked them to do as part of their process is to provide us some draft ordinance language that would embrace shared parking and maximize underutilized spaces, as well as implementing any best practices and industry standards as it came to the number of parking spaces that should be required of any given use. As part of that, we did also ask them to establish a zoning district specific parking minimum maximum recommendation. So you saw that document as part of your background report, that as part of this ordinance update, at least where we are at today, we would be contemplating creating a parking minimum maximum that is specifically for the central business district parking, that is more applicable, I guess, for that more urban style downtown that does not necessarily require the large fields of parking that you would maybe see in a larger commercial area. So that document was included in your background as well. We also asked them to refine their parking generation model. This was something that they created as part of the initial study. It's actually a neat little tool based on an Excel spreadsheet that runs a number of equations that allows you to plug in a square footage for a use, determine based on our ordinance what that would require for parking. And as part of this update, we asked them to incorporate a available shared parking capacity. So based on those utilization counts, how much shared parking is available at any given time. And then we can see just with a couple of data inputs and a couple of clicks, how does that use impact what's available in the just for shared parking? And again, what would those requirements be based on some of these new minimum and maximum recommendations? And then we also did ask them something that has come to light due to the COVID situation is the request for some better recommendations or recommendations to better accommodate curbside parking. As we all know, parking itself really has not been an issue over the last not quite a year due to the COVID situation and limited ability to have folks mingling and together. So curbside has become very popular, especially now when that is the only option for our restaurants. Again, today, not so much an issue because typically folks that are coming to pick up have a spot. But assuming that we are able to get out of the COVID situation, hopefully in the near future, and things start to pick up and get back to normal, there has been some comments from our business community that they really like having the ability for those that will still likely for some time want to continue to do curbside parking and be able to park close, pick up, get up and leave, the high turnover type thing. So we did also ask that to be incorporated into this review of our parking ordinance. So as you saw in your background packet, we did get some draft ordinance language. It was actually conducted in a way that edited the current ordinance. So you saw the strike through and the suggested changes. So you've got some comparison as to what was there previously. Just a couple of highlights from that ordinance language. It does reference those updated parking minimum maximums that would be specific to the central business district. It would still allow for shared parking agreements between private parties to meet those parking minimums. It would allow a development with or an expansion or change of use to utilize a percentage of available shared parking within 1,000 feet to to meet the minimum parking requirements, excuse me. So this is kind of as we're getting into trying to better utilize our shared parking, this kind of requirement or tool would be the ability to use that parking model tool and say how much parking is available at a given time. What's the primary time that people are going to be visiting this new use, so we can see how those impacts are, and then allow some of that available shared parking to be used to meet those minimum parking requirements. It also notes available public spaces would be determined using an adopted utilization count and calculated through that parking generation model. The idea would be that those utilization counts are completed and updated periodically, probably no more than every 2 years. As things change, we want to make sure that parking and available parking is based on actual real world use. So when we do get to a situation, if we are at capacity, we know that. It does also allow for a conditional use permit to be requested to reduce parking requirements, as you saw in the draft ordinance, that not only would the shared parking availability still need to be able to accommodate that if a use is not going to be able to produce their full minimum parking requirements, but it would also then require a payment of that shortage in parking to a parking fund that would be utilized in the future to try to help with parking initiatives in the downtown area. And then we did not really have any draft language in the ordinance, but there was some comment left more for discussion in the memo from our consultants that was attached to the background packet related to some options for time restricted parking for curbside or pickup. So I do want to just share, and hopefully I can get these to work, our parking demand model, so you can kind of get a sense for how that is working. It's a little easier to visualize, and I apologize, I had it up, but when I rebooted my computer, it looks like it closed. So give me 1 minute here to get that back. So are you seeing this Excel spreadsheet right now?
Yes.
All right. So this is the parking demand model that was created by HKGI as part of their initial parking study. You can see we actually still have the original template here, which was created based on our existing ordinance. They did build out this another option of this based on some of those potential changes to the ordinance related to minimums and maximums and shared parking. So just as kind of a quick demo of what we mean when we're looking at this, this is essentially showing, this is the area I think we want to focus on because it is the public only available spaces. So based on those current utilization counts, we're saying that there are at 10 a.m. on a weekday, there are 171 public spaces available. At noon, 107. In the evening, 94. And then, of course, on the weekend, we see less during the day because we don't necessarily have as many of the people that are working in some of the office areas that are there. So you see some increased availability during the daytime, but of course you see a decreased availability in that public parking as you get to the evening on the weekends. So showing a capacity at 6 o'clock of about 29. So the way this tool works is, let's say we were planning to, or we got a proposal that a coffee shop wanted to go in downtown. So based on the square footage, let's say it's a 3,500 square foot coffee shop. This tool will calculate based on those minimum and maximums, how many minimum parking spaces are required, 18, maximum required 35. We don't want more than 35 created based on this use. It also then updates these tables up here for the shared public parking as to what would be available with that use at those given times. So you can see something like a coffee shop that would likely be a daytime use. There's plenty of shared capacity to go around. And you know, it's the only place where it hits a negative is in those evening hours where that shared parking model goes down in the negative. But because this use is likely not going to have a ton of folks in the evening hours, you know, that's part of what goes into the equation is determining how much of this available public parking should be able to be allowed to be used to meet their requirements. So in a situation like this where it is saying the minimum requirement of parking is 18, you know, we may be able to look at this tool and say, okay, we think because of daytime use, the shared parking can accommodate 10 to 12 of those 18 spaces. So as far as your on-site parking, you only need to provide 6. That's kind of the idea behind this shared parking model. Of course, this is just a made-up example, but that I think is what we're trying to accomplish by modifying this a little bit and really looking at real-world use and time of day and that sort of thing. The tool does also then allow us to discontinue a land use. So let's say that coffee shop went in place of a restaurant that was there. So we'll put that same 3,500 square feet in the restaurant. That is then going to recalculate this. And because a restaurant has a much higher parking requirement, you'll see it actually increased the available shared parking downtown. So we were negative previously, and now because we've gotten rid of that restaurant use, we've actually got some surplus. So it's kind of a neat tool. It's a pretty powerful tool to be able to at least run some scenarios and kind of see how that impacts. Of course, it is very contingent on those utilization counts being as up to date as possible, which is why I indicate we'd likely want to make sure that those are conducted at a minimum of every 2 years just to make sure they're up to date. And so then the other document I wanted to share is the proposed parking minimums and maximums. Let me zoom in on this one a little bit. So this table was also included in your background packet. You will note that it's got uses listed on the left-hand side. It notes what the current parking requirement is in our current code, and then it is giving a proposed off-street minimum and off-street maximum parking for those uses within the CBD. So you'll see a lot of the maximums are close or in line with what the current ordinance says. but it is reducing some of those minimums by, give or take that 50% mark, which in many cases are being reduced by that 50% anyway based on our current ordinance. So I don't know that we need to go through every single use and parking requirement, but this is based on, as was noted in the background packet, some of the industry standards and best practices of some of those professional organizations that study this stuff for a living. So for tonight, I think our discussion, at least what staff envisions, and of course we're open to any other questions or thoughts from the commission, just trying to determine overall thoughts on the direction of this ordinance. If the commission feels this shared parking model is something that we should continue to pursue, or if we're way off base as we're thinking about this. I think there was a blank left in the draft ordinance about what percentage of the minimum required parking should be allowed to be used for shared parking. I don't think we'd want to allow 100% in all cases or any cases. But that's a point of discussion. Is there a thought on how much shared parking should be allowed to meet those minimums? Thoughts on those revised parking minimum maximums for central business district, and also some thoughts on time restricted parking, whether that be in front of businesses or, as was requested or recommended in the consultant memo, potentially having an area of downtown that is like a curbside pickup parking area, so you have a number of spots that are time restricted parking. And then just for the commission, I think that what our next steps will be, obviously this is kind of the first time this information has been put out there. So we certainly need to engage downtown stakeholders and gather public feedback. But before we even got that far, we wanted to get your input and, of course, make any revisions to that proposed ordinance on any of the initial feedback. And then our plan would be to solicit feedback from our downtown folks and get their thoughts on it. So with that, Chair, I will turn it over to you and the commission.
Okay, thanks, Marty. Well, I'm interested to go through this. I was the rep, and Laura, were you also? I know I was one of the representatives for the parking committee from the planning commission. Laura, were you part of that?
I was, yes.
Yeah, I thought so. And I know for sure our downtown business owners are definitely going to be interested in that. So, we'll definitely keep them in mind as we go through this. I think that I don't think we have much of a choice, but that shared parking is really what we have to explore. I think it's probably our only option, really. And I think it's a good one. Any thoughts or comments, anyone?
This is Commissioner Moore. I have lots of thoughts. So should I just dive in?
Dive in.
Okay. Well, I will add, the reason why I joined the Planning Commission was because of parking. And it's an issue that I felt at the time when I joined the Planning Commission pretty passionate about, and I'm still fairly passionate about. And I'm very happy to see that we have these parking minimum and maximum, this discussion being had. Most major cities, even medium-sized cities, have this. And I think it's really, really important to have in our zoning because it ensures success of businesses that may be 5 years ahead of another business that comes in at a later stage. I think the goal of this is to protect businesses and have them be assured that they're going to have parking for their customers. With that said, when my feedback that I provide, it all is from a filter of like thinking as a business owner. I'm just going to go high level. The item that concerns me the most is the reduction of 500 feet to the addition of an additional 500 feet from the, I'll read this out loud. The maximum allowable walking distance for parking to qualify as available shared parking in the shared parking analysis shall be, what's proposed now is 1,000 feet measured from the principal entrance of the proposed development, expansion, or change of use. To put that in perspective, to walk from the Noble Lion to the Social is 528 feet. 528 feet. So that's essentially 2 blocks. What this is proposing is that a parking radius of 4 blocks, right? 1,000 feet. I do not support this. I have a big challenge with this. You add additional 500 feet and our businesses will never get curbside parking. It just won't exist. It can't be managed. It can't happen. The other businesses closer to the core will have first dibs at those parking stalls. I've always had a concern about those. While I get it, we have a land scarcity issue in downtown CBD. I get it. Those parking stalls that were added on the, call it the north part of Victoria along, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on what street that is. It works well for when we have our car shows, but there's not a lot of businesses there, especially when you factor in the east side, like the businesses along Victoria Drive, like Floyd's, all the new shops right there, where you have the clothing store, the home furnishing store, the eyeglass store. Those customers will never park all the way over there, and this calculation is providing that assumption. And so I have a real problem with that. And you factor in already you have 50% reduction in parking capacity because it's a downtown CBD. We're not Minneapolis. We're Victoria. And I will say we're not a destination city. We're not Excelsior. We don't have a major lake. Yes, we have a charming city that we all love, and we have fantastic restaurants and cute shops. And to some degree, it is a destination city, but it's not the same capacity. So that's my first issue. The other problem I have is the parking fund, and I've been very vocal on this from the beginning. The parking fund, if I'm a business owner, I have no interest putting any money in a parking fund without a in place. If I'm a business owner, I want to know where this additional parking is going to be and how is it going to benefit me? Where is it going to be located and how much money is going to be gathered and what kind of is going to be necessary? That's a big problem for me. And I will, if I'm a business owner, I don't want to have my money just sitting someplace that I don't know when it's going to be spent and how it's going to be spent. So that's another item that I am not in support of. I'm very much in support of the maximum minimum parking. I think it's necessary and great. I wish we would have had it in the very beginning. I think it could have helped us, but it is what it is. We're here today and we're trying our best to make right. But in terms of the street side parking, let's see, what section is that? No more than blank % of the uses required parking minimum shall consist of shared public parking unless through a CUP. I don't know yet. I'm not sure. I'm of the opinion it should be a small percentage, especially since our parking calculations are 50% of what's traditional. So that's my feedback. I have additional little notes here and there, but those are my big items of concern.
Thank you. I would second and agree with that 1,000-foot buffer, and wholeheartedly on the parking fund. I have had an issue with this since day one. Also, I get where it's going, but I don't get what it's for. It's significant money to a potential business owner, but it's not significant money to the city, and it just sits. And even if we were to say 10 years down the road we have to build a parking structure, and it's millions of dollars, and we've got, thousands of dollars from this parking fund. It does nothing for that. It's just, like I said, I don't think it's significant for the city at all. It's more of I get it, it's a penalty of some sort, but it doesn't serve our business owners. I don't think it serves the city in the long run. I just agree wholeheartedly that parking fund I just don't understand it.
Chair, just to jump in here, I would say that I think staff, at least current staff, wholeheartedly agrees with you. We've had numerous conversations internally about this parking fund and the ambiguity of what those funds are to be used. I can tell you, at least from the current staff, that if a parking fund were to remain, and we're not suggesting it should or shouldn't, right? We're talking through what some possible options are. But if a parking fund were to remain, it certainly would be tied to some sort of plan as to what is that funding actually being used to, and how does it benefit the downtown core. But I just note that staff agrees with you on that as it sits today, that's not a good use.
Yeah, for sure.
Is there actual money in the parking fund today?
A little bit. I want to say there's $40,000 or something that has been paid based on the current ordinance on under parking or not meeting parking minimums. But as Commissioner Moore alluded to, there's not a plan tied to what those funds should be used for.
Commissioners, any other comments?
This is Commissioner Iverson. I was part of a study group when we first moved here about 7 years ago, and one of the topics, as a matter of fact, it was a topic that I brought up, and there was no support for it, but the parking issue remains an issue that has to be dealt with. It's the only way that downtown Victoria is going to grow and continue to grow, and that's a parking structure, and that has been roundly. It's my understanding it has been roundly rejected from many different angles, and I understand why, and I understand. So who's going to pay for this? And that ultimately is the big question. Fees from businesses, that would be very questionable. How much revenue could come in from that source. So what I would like to see is a in-depth study that's being done by this organization that has done this particular study, or another organization that's involved directly in a study of that nature. And so then we would have the information, and then we would be able to make a recommendation to City Council based on some in-depth research and some individual views of where this goes at the same time. And again, this was 7 years ago, and everyone said, well, we got a real problem. And today we don't have quite the problem, but when the new norm returns, and hopefully that'll be sooner rather than later, the whole situation will change dramatically, and so we have to figure out how to respond to that.
Thanks, Commissioner Iverson. Anybody else?
I'm going to throw a crazy idea out there. So help me understand why the new proposed 15 acres is in the CBD. And where I'm going with this is, as this code is written, that development has access to all of the CBD parking because it's zoned CBD. Why does it have to be part of the CBD? Why can't it be something different and have the same exact requirements and basically a lot of the same design principles and standards, but just a different parking criteria? I don't know if that's just going to make all of the city have their hair stand up on their head, but I mean, like it's you're really splitting hairs. I mean, we do have a land scarcity issue. I don't think that much more development is going to happen in the city of Victoria. I think about where the land waste, I call it land waste site. And I'm sorry, Marty, you're welcome to step in and tell me what it's the correct terminology.
Are you referring to the 13.5 acre downtown west development? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, I am. That's the property that I'm talking about, the CBD issue. But as far as future development, I think about the sites. Oh, I should know the name of this street.
It's like the old public works area. Yeah, the old maintenance site across from the brewery, basically.
Yeah. Correct. That's the only other future site that I see a development could happen. And by the way, I think the city prefers some kind of city works to exist there, from what I've heard. So I don't see that much new development happening outside of the 15 acres. So I'm just wondering why. So if you can help me understand that better, that would be appreciated.
Sure. So Commissioner Moore, Chair, Commissioners, just to make sure I'm understanding your question correctly, your question is, why would the new development in the 13.5 acre downtown west need to meet the current CBD parking requirements as opposed to the general parking requirements, which at this point essentially means you wouldn't be able to reduce by 50%. Is that your question?
Yes and no. I just want it out of the parking calculations. I don't want it out of the same pool of parking stalls. That's my concern. I want it to operate on its own, independently from our downtown as it is today.
And I think that's entirely practical and feasible, right? I mean, when the downtown west development happens, my assumption is we would likely treat it the same way as the existing downtown as far as what parking requirements are. But certainly when we'd be looking at calculating available parking, it's a little cart ahead of the horse, but I'd imagine you'd have a second parking model generation spreadsheet similar to the one you have for downtown, because I mean you're getting beyond that, even that 1,000 feet radius, which it sounds like there's not much support for. So it really is, for parking purposes, would likely be calculated separately. We certainly wouldn't, I think, from a internal perspective, say, well, there just was a new 100 parking lot put in downtown west, so now we have 100 available parking spaces in downtown. I think we'd be looking at those a little bit separately.
Great.
I have a question. This is Mary Jo. Has anyone done a study as to who is using those places? People who live in Victoria and visitors. I'd love to know the percent. Because one thing I feel is that we've all chosen Victoria to live here because we love it. And downtown should be, we should really make an effort to make downtown fully available to our residents. I wish there were some way that we could guarantee our residents parking places. That's all.
Yeah, Commissioner Gar, Chair, Commissioners, I'm unaware of that level of detail being done in the parking utilization counts. I think absent having someone surveying folks as they're going to their car and asking where they live, that would be a difficult survey to do. Not impossible, but challenging. I know that there was, as part of that initial study, a breakdown between employees and how many employees are parking in a given area or business versus those that are coming into downtown for shopping, eating, those types of things. But as far as actually analyzing how many of the folks using the spaces are from Victoria or outside of Victoria, that as far as I know, has not been studied.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would think some of our downtown business owners, just by looking at zip codes from credit card receipts, would have a pretty good idea what percentage of their business comes from here or there. But I'm not sure our business owners care too much about that, as long as that business keeps coming in, which is good for all of us.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would think Floyd's and the borough are destinations and would have a high degree of people outside of the city. And other restaurants too, people like to go to and try different restaurants, right? So you think of like the Noble Lion, I'm kind of surprised Chan doesn't have a nice place like that, but if they do, I don't know of it. So we have some nice places. So,
for all our Chanhassen friends watching, no, they don't have anything like that.
It seems like all of this really is dancing around the bigger issue of is how do you get more shared parking in total?
Yeah.
What's the deal with the landscape company that kind of is a little closer in than the old maintenance place? It seemed like it'd be pretty easy for them to move. That's a nice piece of property.
Yeah, we have not had any conversations with them recently, have not had any indication that they're currently interested in relocating. I believe there was some engagement done again in 2 years ago when this study was first completed, and as I noted in our next steps, our plan is to re-engage those stakeholders again as part of this process. So that will certainly be some of the conversations we'll be having moving forward.
I thought there also was some discussion in one of our previous meetings about maybe a relationship with the Carver Park for parking by that maintenance area, that there was going to be more of an access point into the park here in the city.
You're talking the old Public Works garage?
Correct.
Yeah. So right now we do have that striped for parking. So that is available, striped and signed for parking. We did see this summer that it did have some use. I think the farmers market kind of got people familiar with it. And then we did see a lot of trail and bike users that were using that location to park, which again, indirectly, I think helps the downtown parking situation, because if you can keep some of the folks that are really coming in just to use the trails and parks and have them park with some better access to those trails, that's going to free up some of those spaces in the more core downtown area. So while I know there is some disagreement as to how beneficial that parking is that far out, I think it does at least indirectly have an impact on some of the parking, because if you can get park and trail users out a little farther, it of course helps. But yeah, that is available for parking now. It is signed for parking now, and it does provide a nice easy access onto the trail that goes along Steiger Lake and behind City Hall. And we did see some use this summer of that parking lot.
This is just an idea I'm thinking of as you said that, and I don't know, what kind of effect it would have, but I know, the Carver Park, the trail system, we do have a ton of people that park bikes here, or park their car here and hop off their bikes just because, we got great coffee shops and things for after or before. But is that I wonder if there'd be any benefit to adding that parking space as almost like a trailhead. I mean, I remember even with the, apartments right across from City Hall before we had signs and things, so much of a lot of it, I think, is people don't know. And people are, we're Minnesotans and we obey the law even if we don't know if it's a law, and we don't park where we don't think we're supposed to. And I think a lot of people still are just not aware that they can park there. I know it's not a tremendous amount of spots or spaces, but even if we could get things like that listed on trailhead maps from Carver Park that people could see, that, I mean, it's a drop in the bucket, but it might help. The dog agrees. Whoever dog that is.
Locate the porta potty down there, and I think that would be an attraction too.
Yeah.
For the trailhead. Right now it's downtown, right?
Anyone else? Any comments, thoughts from the package today?
This is Commissioner Pedersen. I'm of the opinion that each area has kind of got to dictate its own parking situation. I know it's not popular, but I'm pretty much against any sort of ramp going up in the central business district. I think the 13 acres should kind of be its own entity and have its own parking regulations within what our city ordinances are. But their pocket is different from central business, which is different from the other areas. That's all. I just see it as three distinct and different locations versus piling them all up together as one. I'll hang up and listen.
Well, don't hang up. You can just
I was just on. I was having Wi-Fi issues.
Know.
I moved around. I'm kind of back.
You're back. We see you. We hear you. Thank you. Anyone else?
Well, just comment on the time-restricted parking, because I know there are a few places where it's 15-minute parking, but who polices that?
Well, we've even have some spots where we used to that were longer, 4 hours and things, and we've talked in the part of the parking group and committee. I know we talked about parking meters and different things. I mean, the fact is we don't have anybody to police that. It's sort of policing yourself, and it's going to be like that for the foreseeable future. But to your point, I do think once we kind of get back to just whatever normal is, and probably a mix, and let's hope for all our businesses that in addition to having walk-up customers, maybe they increase their business by still having some takeout customers. People get used to that. So, I mean, I think it's a valid point that we should have some limited parking, right in front for those folks, so people could stop in quick and get in and out. Especially, I mean, our School of the Wise and Ruby's Roost. I mean, that's always probably quite a bit of their business. So, it's a great convenience for customers. It's good for the business, but we only have so much of that space. It's hard to balance all that. I think this is a great conversation, and I mean, the one recommendation I would have, Marty, too, is before we get too far with this, I thought it was very helpful when the planning or the parking commission, before we had meetings with the business owners and get the feedback, because the feedback was surprisingly pretty diverse from different folks too, and I think it really needs to play into this. Laura, you were part of that. What do you think? That's I'd hate to go too far without getting them in this.
I completely agree. I think every business, depending on where they're at and if they have their own private parking, it varies. I don't think Floyd's has a real parking problem. They have a parking lot and their customers are able to park. Golly, I think someone needs to mute. There's a lot of squeaky. But then you get some other folks that are more on the east side of downtown, and it gets trickier. Or let's just say hypothetically, you're a Noble Lion. I mean, they're not all the same. And we need to be thoughtful of the way our CBD parking is written, because it is 50% less than capacity. We want our business to be successful. We do. At the same time, we want our residents and visitors to have a place to park. Getting the businesses involved is very, very important. I completely agree, Scott.
Yeah, we have a couple built-in challenges. We just don't have as much space, and you're going to have to walk. This isn't like a Target where you have that big parking lot and you can see it and you're walking up to it. You are a few blocks away or 4 blocks away a lot of times, and it takes a walk. And it's easy for us to say, oh, that's the charm of Victoria. But to a dentist, on Main Street there, that's not charming when his patients have to walk 4 blocks just to get in for an appointment. Now, granted, that's probably not happening that often at 10 o'clock in the morning. But I know when we met with them in the past, that happened. Or eyeglasses, coming in for your eyeglass appointment thing. That was one of their frustrations is that walk that people, especially on a day like today.
Or especially if you're a senior and you have disabilities. I mean, that's a problem.
Yeah, for sure.
Have we addressed?
If I go to Excelsior, it seems like they have the same, they're bigger, but they have the same challenges, and they have parking lots on both sides of Water Street in the back, but those things fill up very quickly, and then you're parking somewhere on the street. So you're having to walk, and if you want to go to a restaurant, that's just the way it is, I think. But how are they handling it any different?
One thing I want to point out, and I'm very in tune to this because this is my industry, but businesses don't always thrive in Excelsior. While it's cute and charming, they really struggle, and parking is part of it. If you don't have parking and you don't make things easy for customers, they don't thrive and they'll close. There are several empty spaces in Excelsior right now that are going to be challenging to lease, and I just think it's something to be mindful of.
Yeah, no, I understand. There definitely has been there's a lot of churn there. Maybe there's not enough unique products. I know that in a lot of towns where they took a major road and tried to make it a pedestrian walkway, that was totally unsuccessful. It's kind of like Nicollet Mall, right? People want to be able to drive up and be close to the business. So I would agree with that.
Another great example is West End. The restaurants do well, but all the other stores, they're closing left and right. The clothing stores are all closing. I mean, it looks very, very different than it did originally. Minnesotans are used to convenience. I mean, we have, like you said, the weather, and that does impact people's interest in going to shop or eat. If they have to walk for 15 minutes and they freeze their butt off to go to a store.
Commissioner Pedersen, I saw you raise your hand. I thought looked like you had a comment.
I did. It was building off of the previous discussion just regarding handicap spaces and the ability for those who have that sticker to get to places. Have we seen a shortage at all of parking for that type of situation or not?
Commissioner Pedersen, Chair, Commissioners, I am unaware of that being a large concern. I can't say that. It's never happened that all of those handicap spaces in certain areas have been full, but I'm unaware of that being an issue.
Okay, just curious. And then I completely agree with Laura. I think Excelsior is a fun little town to go visit, but I would never want to open a business there. And I do not think it's the model that we should be trying to follow.
Anyone else?
Marty,
Commissioner Iverson, I would go back to the parking structure. There doesn't seem to be any agreement with this group on that at the same time. That said, I think the perception of what a structure would do and what the cost would be, I don't know. Maybe City Hall knows, but I don't know what that is, and I don't know the effectiveness of it. But it seems as though it's a solution to a pretty substantial problem, and a problem that has not been addressed to any large extent in the 7 years that we've been here. And so, for the city council to approve an expenditure to take a look at it and then either vote it up or vote it down, however that may happen. But I think the key thing is to have the information and to have the knowledge to everyone to be able to make an intelligent decision.
Chair, commissioners, so Commissioner Stenzlen and Commissioner Moore, you may have a little bit of insight on this as well, since it was prior to when I started with the city. But as I understand, there were some conversations related to a parking structure and how a parking structure could potentially happen downtown. Of course, there's a high dollar value associated with that. There is some potential land acquisition. There's the building of it. And at my understanding is that some of the conversations about how potentially to pay for that, whether that be through a local option sales tax or some sort of special taxing district, that there was not much, if any, support from the business community to move forward with something like that.
I would say that the response is inconclusive. I don't feel like we did a good enough job to get real solid feedback, other than the few business owners that were part of the parking committee. Because I do know several people that would be in support of it. Now, we don't know what the costs are. Obviously, what's the cost? How is it allocated to the business owners? And what percentage are they responsible for? I think, this goes to city council. I know that our current mayor is very much opposed of this parking structure, but would the residents be okay with paying for it? And by the way, there's lots of different ways to create a parking field. It doesn't have to be a structure. It could be, dedicated land with an adjacent development. I'll give you an example. So east of Floyd, there's land, a little small piece of land, and then to the north of that, there's the Leitner property. Yeah, it's a little on the west side of the CBD, but it could help this problem to some degree. Let's say a multifamily project goes there, and a portion of this parking field goes to dedicated public parking. Let's call it even 30 stalls. That could be very helpful and with very little cost to the city. Solutions like that, I think, are important to consider. And also, I think it's important that we motivate developers to do these things, because truly most developers get not very excited about dedicating their land for public use. But if we can be thoughtful about how we motivate them to do that, that's another consideration.
Yeah, Commissioner Moore, Chair, Commissioners, I would say two pieces to that. anytime we have any conversation with anybody about potentially doing something downtown, we do ask about a parking structure and if and how a parking structure could be included with that. I think you're right, Commissioner Moore, that the best way or maybe the easiest way to see something like that happen would be with development and through development. The second piece to that is we will be working with the city council in the first quarter of next year to really try to beef up our business subsidy policy. Right now, we know that a city has a lot of tools in its tool belt that it can use. Victoria does have a business subsidy policy, but it's very short and generic. We plan to try to actually have a more well thought and thorough business subsidy policy about what tools in the tool belt the city council may or may not be willing to offer in development type situations. This has been apparent as part of our ongoing discussions with Downtown West as well. It helps staff when staff is at the table with these folks to be able to at least give some indication as to, yes, the council is generally supportive of XYZ, but they're not supportive of ABC. So that's a very good point as well, and something that's going to be more fleshed out in the first quarter of 2021.
Thanks, Marty. I want to make one quick comment. I don't want to belabor the point, but since Commissioner Iverson brought it up and Commissioner Moore commented, I would agree with Commissioner Moore from our days on the parking task force. We talked about parking ramps or spaces, but I would agree with Commissioner Moore. I don't think it was really vetted out. Yeah, it seemed like there were some politics involved, where it would go and who's going to pay for this. So personally, I didn't feel as though we ever really got any real solid footing and figures and I guess what I would say serious discussions. And I would agree, it's something worth taking a look at, or at least getting more information so we or the city council, I should say, and the city council can make more informed decisions on that. Mm-hmm. Because it certainly is, it's an option. There's no question about it.
I would like to add to this. We can make an underground parking facility a visual feature in our town by planting a garden on the roof. And it would draw people. It's a beautiful thing to do. And I've seen many towns that have done this, and it draws people into the town because it's an unusual use of a roof, but it's a big plus visually for the town. That's it.
Thank you. That's a great idea. That's what we need. Ideas.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Marty, you're probably looking for a little bit of feedback on the calculations for all the different uses. The only feedback I have is on the industrial use. And while the CBD doesn't really have much industrial, the future commercial district will. And showroom space, we might want to revisit that and just make it a little bit bigger. It's a little bit more parking, because as I talked to a few colleagues today, they're seeing about 3.25 per 1,000 square feet for showroom space. And that's what's kind of in the market today. But overall, I mean, if you're using ULI standards, that this is good. This is, I think, good. We don't want to be too onerous on these calculations. I mean, we certainly could have been more onerous on many different categories, but I always go back to that future commercial district and just think, how can we make sure we don't mess it up? So that's my only 2 cents.
As Commissioner Iverson, again, not to belabor the point, but when I do look at this study, there was some real management, quite frankly, that went into it. The 15-minute parking is a necessity at the same time, but the long term, the next 10 to 20 years, that's really not in here. And what is it going to take to get us to 2035? And what does 2035 look like for the city of Victoria? And I really think that as certainly as Scott had stated, that we do need more information, and we do have to look at a few other options. And I think those people that are involved in the business of parking for cities, I look at White Bear Lake, the historic White Bear Lake. They've done a pretty darn nice job. And they ended up tearing out buildings in one square block and made it a parking lot. And I think there was a song about that back in the 60s at the same time. But I'm not so sure we want to do that. But we do have to provide that parking facility for our city. So. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? So certainly anybody can have some more comments. I'm going to try and sum up a little bit, and because I've got a lot of notes here. But Marty and staff, I think you've done a great job, kind of with this initial go through on the ordinance discussion. I do think, as we said, maybe some of the numbers need some tweaking. I'd like to, as I stated earlier, if we could get some of the downtown businesses involved with this probably sooner than later and get some feedback from them. I also think it is probably worth revisiting and getting more feedback or information around, a parking structure or parking lots. That being said, I think we're all aware that if we could wave a magic wand and say, okay, here's the money, we're going to build a parking structure of some sort. We know that's going to take time, but we still need to get something in place right now. And I think this shared route is a great route if we can, fine tune it as equal as we can for all the different businesses that are downtown. But I think it's a good short-term to maybe mid-term solution. And like Commissioner Iverson said, in the long term, knock on wood, we continue to be a successful small city, and we need something like that. That would be a good problem, but we're probably better off to identify all those things now and kind of get a plan in place for that. Anything I missed? Anybody want to add? I'm sure. Please do.
Very well stated.
I don't usually get the last word, so someone, I'm sure someone.
I would agree. I mean, I think it's hard because we're creating parking calculations here in 2020, and we don't know what the future holds. I mean, perfect example, Amazon. I mean, when they first started opening their warehouse facilities, their employee counts were way down. I mean, now they have way more people, and they need to have parking stalls for all their employees. So it's there needs to be language in here that allows the city to revisit this more soon than every 2 years, in my opinion, as well, if its business is struggling. So I think that's an important consideration.
That is, when you think about it too, and I guess I'm, like restaurants. I mean, how fortunate we are, and you think about different cities. I mean, in the past, just few years, like Noble Lion, how successful that is. Winchester and Rye, how successful, instead of restaurants going out of business, we're getting great restaurant. We're known as Victoria. Who'd have thought it? We're a restaurant city. People travel here, and we'll probably have more. It kind of feeds on itself. So you're absolutely right, Commissioner Moore. I think we might have to look at this a little more often as that short term where we're sharing, because it's just that we could make a great plan right now, and we're going to outgrow it. And it, again, it's a good problem, but it could be easily outgrown in a year.
I'll add that, Marty, you're going to have to get real good at saying no to uses that just don't work. Because we're getting built out.
Yeah, the way we are now. But at the same time, I still think too, and I'm not sure how, but we need to do a little better job on education on parking spaces. And I get it. Some of them aren't so near, but when you do see a Wednesday night car show, and that's one end of it's the far end of the spectrum. But when you do see that northeast end with everybody parked that's a lot. I'm amazed at how many cars get, and not people on the grass and things. I get we do extra for that, but just the parking and how many cars we get downtown and how many people we have on those nights. I mean, again, it's a little bit of a walk, but we can accommodate a big group of people, but you got to know where to park.
I guess I would just add, as we're looking at growing the parking capabilities, that we keep the eye towards the West development area. I'm not going to say that the Central Business District has what it has, but again, expansion, I think places like Wayzata has a great parking situation. I've never had an issue there. They also have a ramp. I think as that west end is built out, we need to focus on how can we make that best. Not that the Central Business District is done, but other than putting a ramp wherever Schmitty's just south of, Vicks, where else would you put a ramp? So I just think we need to focus on trying to do the best with what we've got, but then try to make sure this is not a problem for the west side. That's all.
Yeah, I think I hope we've learned from, I don't want to say our mistakes, but our growth in a limited spot, that the West 13.5, that has to be self-supporting. I mean, that's got to take care of itself.
Exactly what I'm thinking. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
What does the widening of 5 do to anything? Does the widening of 5 displace any homes on the north side of the road that really are just a pretty easy walk across the street? Or what does the widening of 5 do?
From what I have seen in their most recent documents, and the county just did a virtual open house that kind of highlighted some of the downtown Victoria area. That information is online. There are a few different options that could potentially happen. There are some that have no impacts on any of the private property. There are some showing what would happen if they were able to acquire some parcels on the south side and what that would impact. So I think right now there are options for both, right? I mean, I think a lot will dictate the timing at when those upgrades actually happen, whether or not there are willing sellers at that point in time or not, how feasible it would be, or again, there are feasible options that accomplish the goals of that corridor without also having to overly impact private property. That's a little, my 50,000 foot analysis of that just from looking at documents. So take all that with a grain of salt, please.
County, state. So Marty, did we provide you with like an adequate amount of guidance tonight, or do you still have some questions for us?
No, I think I have some good direction here. I know there are some concerns with the distances that would be included as how you're going to count your shared parking. Totally get that and understand that. I think we can make some tweaks to that. Definitely, and as I noted in my slides, our kind of next steps to this is to get the businesses involved and get some feedback on that. I don't anticipate this is something where we're going to come with a proposed ordinance to the council in January and want to change. This is going to be something that we'll be talking through and bringing back to this group and massaging and modifying, getting feedback from folks. So I think for a first crack at it, I think that we got some good direction and will help guide the process forward.
Okay. So, we've been talking about this, but let me just officially ask, any more questions or comments from anyone? Hearing none, I'll thank you. We'll conclude this discussion item tonight. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Marty. So we will move on to our miscellaneous section of the agenda. Staff, do you have any miscellaneous items for us tonight?
The only miscellaneous item I have is that this is our last meeting of the year, so want to wish everyone a happy holidays and a happy new year a couple of weeks early.
Thank you. That was one of my questions. So no 29th meeting, December 29th meeting.
No.
All right. It's like a snow day. It's like school. We get a snow day.
We actually, I believe our calendar initially had our two meetings this month on the 1st and the 15th. And as you'll recall, the first was canceled. So this is our second meeting of the month. So we'll be right back at them on January 5th.
All right. Commissioners, any miscellaneous items? All right. Well, if there are no more miscellaneous items tonight, I would close the meeting. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
There it is again. Commissioner Iverson, motion to end the meeting. All right. I think you're about 6-0 on that if we're counting. Is there a second?
Commissioner Kuhn, second.
Okay, I got Commissioner Kuhn. Thank you. So I have a motion to adjourn from Commissioner Iverson, seconded by Commissioner Kuhn. I will now take our roll call vote. Commissioner Kuhn.
Yay.
Commissioner Gar.
Aye.
Commissioner Iverson.
Aye.
Commissioner Moore.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Schwarting.
Aye.
Commissioner Pedersen.
Aye.
I vote aye. Motion carries. Thank you. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, staff. Alyssa, Marty, Isaac, all, this year. Thank you for all the work you've done. It's been a pleasure. Appreciate all your work. Happy holidays, everyone.
Happy holidays.